The crews thought they were prepared for what the fire would reveal. They had drip torches in hand, safety protocols in place, and years of experience burning the Everglades. But when the smoke cleared, what they saw moving through the scorched grass made them realize they had been fighting this war blind. The temperature had spiked to triple digits. The sawgrass crackled and popped as the controlled burn swept across the marsh in Palm Beach County. The firewall pushed forward, driven by a steady wind that turned dry vegetation into fuel. Birds scattered, insects fled. But then the ground itself seemed to come alive. A 12-foot Burmese python emerged from the ash, its camouflage useless against the blackened earth. Then another. Then another. Within minutes, the crew counted dozens of massive snakes, all forced into the open by flames that stripped away their greatest weapon. For the first time, the invaders had nowhere to hide. This was not supposed to happen. The Everglades had been burning for thousands of years, long before humans arrived with their torches and their plans. Lightning would strike the marsh, the grass would burn, nutrients would return to the soil, and the cycle would continue. Fire was medicine for this landscape, but lately these burns have taken on a darker purpose. They have become a weapon in a war we are losing. The question everyone is asking is simple: how many are out there? For decades, scientists estimated thousands, maybe tens of thousands of pythons in the Everglades. Conservative numbers, manageable numbers, numbers that suggested we still had control. The fire proved those estimates were a fantasy. When the flames died down and the ash settled, the land managers stood in silence. They were looking at a truth that had been hiding in plain sight, coiled beneath the grass, waiting in the water, invisible to every survey and every sensor. The Everglades was not being invaded by pythons anymore. It had already been conquered. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to a time when nobody thought a tropical constrictor could survive in North America. Back to the moment when good intentions collided with terrible judgment. The invasion started quietly in the pet shops of Miami. The 1980s and the 90s were the golden age of exotic pets. People wanted something dangerous, something impressive to show their friends. A baby Burmese python fit the bill perfectly. At 20 inches long, they are adorable. They wrap around your wrist like a living bracelet. They are easy to care for. But pythons do not stay small. That cute hatchling becomes 6 feet in a year, then 8 feet, then 10 feet. Suddenly you have a predator the length of a sedan living in your spare bedroom, eating rabbits whole and eyeing the family dog with interest. The feeding bills pile up. The fear sets in. So people made a choice. They drove out to the edge of the Everglades, opened the terrarium, and let them go. They told themselves it was mercy. They told themselves the snake would be happier in the wild. What they actually did was release a perfect killing machine into an ecosystem with no defenses. Then Hurricane Andrew hit in 1992. The storm tore across South Florida like a circular saw, demolishing everything in its path. Breeding facilities were leveled. Pet stores were ripped apart. Zoo enclosures were shattered. Hundreds, maybe thousands of pythons were released into the wild in a single night. The Everglades became their new home, and it was paradise. Warm water, endless hiding spots, and prey that had never encountered a constrictor. No predators, no competition, just an all-you-can-eat buffet, stretching for thousands of square miles. For years, nobody noticed. That is the terrifying part. These snakes are not loud. They do not charge. They are ambush predators that wait in absolute stillness for hours, holding their breath underwater for 30 minutes at a time. They blend into the roots and the shadows. They are engineered for invisibility. By the time scientists realized there was a problem, the ecosystem was already collapsing. The statistics read like a crime report from an ecological massacre. Marsh rabbits, once everywhere in the Everglades, dropped by 99%. Raccoons, 99% gone. Opossums, vanished. Bobcats, nearly extinct in python territory. These were not gradual declines over centuries. This happened in 2 decades. Researchers started finding evidence of the slaughter. A python with the remains of a full-grown deer inside it. another with an alligator lodged in its throat, the snake having burst open from the ambition of trying to swallow a predator too large even for its elastic jaws. Trail cameras stopped recording the usual suspects and started recording nothing but pythons, curled in the same spots where raccoons used to forage. The Everglades was becoming a graveyard, a beautiful green tomb filled with only one living thing: the monster we released. And here is where the fire comes in. Because when you are fighting an enemy you cannot see, you have to change the battlefield. Fire is ancient. Fire is primal. And in the hands of trained crews, fire is surgical. A controlled burn moves through the sawgrass at a walking pace, clearing out the dead vegetation and exposing everything beneath. The native animals know what to do. Birds fly, rabbits run to their burrows, alligators retreat to the water. But pythons? Pythons do not run. They are cold-blooded. They rely on camouflage. Their entire survival strategy is built on not being seen. When the fire strips away the grass, they lose that advantage. Suddenly, they are exposed against a backdrop of charcoal and ash. A 15-foot snake with a pattern designed for shadows and water stands out like a billboard on scorched earth. This is the discovery that changed everything. During the April 2025 burn, land managers watched the smoke clear and saw the ground rippling with movement. It was not a few snakes, it was dozens. In some sections, the density was so high that hunters could barely walk without stepping near a python. The fire revealed the scale, and the scale was horrifying. But it was not just the numbers. It was what the fire exposed about the ecosystem itself. When you burn an area and only pythons emerge, you are looking at a landscape that has been fundamentally altered. A healthy marsh should be teeming with life. You should see mammals scattering, birds diving for fleeing insects, amphibians hopping to safety. In the python zones, there is only silence, the silence of extinction. This is what the burns have shown us. The Everglades is no longer a functioning ecosystem in many areas. It is a monoculture, a snake farm, and the fire is the only tool we have that forces them into the open long enough to fight back. So the burns continue. Crews move through the marsh with drip torches, igniting controlled fires that turn the landscape into a smoky hellscape. The heat is intense. The flames roar, and the pythons, forced to choose between burning alive and running, finally move. Hunters wait at the edge of the burn zone, armed with hooks and bags. When a snake emerges, they grab it. It is brutal work. A 12-foot python can kill a grown man if it gets coiled properly. But these hunters are professionals. They have been training for this. And slowly, one snake at a time, they are reclaiming territory. But here is the catch. For every python they remove, how many are still hiding? How many are deep in the mangroves where fire cannot reach? How many are in the wet prairies, the flooded forests, the areas too dangerous or too remote to burn? The answer might be in the hundreds of thousands. Some estimates go higher, and those are just the adults. Every female python can lay up to 100 eggs. If even a fraction of those eggs survive, the numbers become exponential. This is the nightmare scenario, that we are not fighting an invasion, we are fighting a colonization, and the colonizers are winning. The fire exposed another truth. The pythons are not just surviving, they are adapting. Biologists have started documenting behavioral changes that suggest these snakes are learning. They are avoiding the areas that get burned regularly. They are moving deeper into the wetlands. They are changing their activity patterns to avoid detection. There are reports of pythons in urban areas now, curled around pool pumps in Miami, found in backyards in Homestead. They are using the canal systems as highways, traveling through the underground waterways that connect the Everglades to the suburbs. Some researchers believe the snakes are being drawn to the electromagnetic signatures of cities, or perhaps just following the scent of prey. Rats thrive near humans. Raccoons raid garbage cans. To a python, a subdivision is just another hunting ground with better cover and more food. This brings us to the theories. the ones that keep ecologists awake at night. What if the burns are creating selective pressure? What if we are accidentally breeding a smarter, more heat-resistant python? Evolution does not care about our intentions. It only cares about survival. If we keep burning the Everglades, we might be selecting for snakes that can detect smoke earlier, that burrow deeper, that avoid open areas entirely. There is a darker theory. Some biologists whisper about melanistic adaptation. If we turn the Everglades black with repeated burns, will the pythons turn black to match? Will we create a generation of charcoal-colored snakes that become invisible against the scorched earth? A predator you cannot see until you are already within striking range? Nature has done this before. Peppered moths in industrial England turned black when the trees were covered in soot. It happened in a single generation. Why couldn't it happen here? Then there is the climate question. Florida is warming. The seasons are breaking. The dry season is becoming a kiln, turning the sawgrass into tinder. Every controlled burn is a gamble now. If the wind shifts, if the peat soil catches fire, the entire Everglades could burn for months. Peat fires do not just consume the surface. They burn underground, destroying the ancient layers of organic material that make this ecosystem unique. The land managers are walking a razor wire. Burn too little and the pythons conquer the brush. Burn too much and you risk an inferno that sterilizes the earth. And while they are calculating angles and wind speeds, the enemy is breeding. There is another fear. The deep glades. The areas we cannot reach with fire or with hunters. Miles of flooded forest and dense mangrove where boats cannot go and helicopters cannot land. What is happening there? Some theorize that by eliminating pythons in the accessible areas, we are creating a sanctuary population in the unreachable zones. Without human pressure, are those snakes growing larger? Are there matriarchs out there, 25 feet long, laying clutches of 100 eggs at a time? Are we allowing the evolution of giants in the heart of darkness? The data suggests something is living back there. Trail cameras at the edge of the deep glades capture glimpses. Massive shapes moving through the water. Disturbances in the mud that suggest something heavy dragging itself across the bottom. But nobody has been able to penetrate deep enough to confirm. This is the horror of fighting an invisible enemy. You can burn the edges. You can clear the accessible zones. But the core remains untouched. And if that core is a breeding ground for the next generation of super pythons, then everything we are doing might be pointless. Science is trying to catch up. Labs are working on genetic solutions. Gene drives that could theoretically wipe out the species by forcing them to produce only male offspring. It sounds perfect. A biological smart bomb that targets pythons and nothing else. But the theories on how this could go wrong read like science fiction. What if the gene mutates? What if the modification jumps species through viral transfer, wiping out native snakes along with the invaders? What if we create a sterile population that lives for 40 years, consuming everything in its path with no biological drive except hunger? Researchers are also developing pheromone traps, synthetic scents that mimic a female python in breeding season. The idea is to lure males out of hiding, but some fear we might be ringing the dinner bell too loudly. Could these concentrated pheromones draw pythons from hundreds of miles away? Could we accidentally concentrate the infestation rather than dispersing it? Every solution carries risks, and while scientists debate genetics and chemistry, the hunters keep burning. Because fire works. It is immediate, it is visible, and it gives the native animals a fighting chance. When you burn a section of the Everglades, the pythons retreat. For a few weeks, maybe a few months, the rabbits return. The birds nest, the ecosystem breathes. But the pythons always come back. The grass grows back, and the cycle begins again. So what is the end game? Can we actually win this war? Or are we just buying time? The optimists say yes. They point to the thousands of pythons removed every year. They talk about new technologies, better detection methods, trained dogs that can smell snake musk from 100 yards away. They believe that with enough effort, enough funding, and enough fire, we can push the pythons back to manageable numbers. The pessimists look at the math. They see an enemy that reproduces faster than we can hunt. They see an ecosystem that has already collapsed in the core python zones. They see a climate that is making controlled burns more dangerous every year. And they ask a simple question. What if Florida just belongs to the snakes now? There is a third group, the ones who study the data in silence and do not share their conclusions publicly. They see patterns that suggest the Everglades is not the final destination. The pythons are expanding. They are moving north, using the canal systems as transit corridors. They are appearing in places they should not be able to survive. There are reports of pythons in the Carolinas now. Isolated sightings, but sightings nonetheless. If the climate continues to warm, if the winters continue to soften, the range could expand. What was once a South Florida problem could become a Southeast problem. A swamp-to-swamp invasion that stretches from the Everglades to the Okefenokee. This is the quiet fear, that the fire is not revealing a problem we can solve. It is revealing a problem we have already lost. But the hunters keep burning anyway, because what else can they do? The alternative is surrender. And surrendering the Everglades means surrendering one of the most unique ecosystems on the planet to an invader that should never have been here in the first place. So the next time you see smoke rising over the horizon in South Florida, thick pillars of gray choking out the sun, understand what you are looking at. You are watching a battlefield. You are watching humans fight to reclaim a landscape they lost through carelessness and greed. The grass will grow back. It always does. The sawgrass is ancient and stubborn. The question is, what will be hiding in it when it returns? Will it be the native wildlife, the bobcats and the deer, reclaiming their ancestral home? Or will it be the next generation of invaders, smarter and more dangerous than the last? The fire reveals the truth, and the truth is terrifying. We are not fighting a snake problem. We are fighting the consequences of our own failures. Every python in the Everglades is there because a human made a choice. To buy an exotic pet, to release it when it became inconvenient, to ignore the warning signs until it was too late. Now we are paying the price. And the price is measured in silence. The silence of a marsh that used to sing with life. The silence of an ecosystem that has been eaten hollow. The burns will continue. The hunters will keep working. And somewhere deep in the flooded forests, in the places fire cannot reach, the pythons will keep breeding. The war is not over. In fact, it might just be beginning. Because here is the final truth the fire revealed. We are not just fighting pythons, we are fighting time. Every year we delay, every section we fail to burn, every breeding season we allow to pass, the enemy grows stronger. The Everglades is the testing ground. If we cannot stop them here, in a relatively contained ecosystem with resources and political will, what happens when they spread? What happens when the problem becomes regional, national? The fire shows us the enemy, but it also shows us ourselves, our mistakes, our arrogance, our belief that we could control nature by releasing apex predators into the wild and walking away. The smoke clears, the ash settles, and the snakes wait in the darkness, coiled and patient, ready to reclaim the ground the moment we turn our backs. So what do you think? Are we fighting a war we can actually win? Or is this just the opening chapter of a much darker story? Can fire and science save the Everglades, or have we already lost? Let me know your thoughts below. And if you want to see more investigations into the battles we are fighting at the edge of the wild, hit that like button and subscribe. Because the truth is out there, hiding in the grass. And sometimes, the only way to see it is to burn everything down.